Welcome to I Hate It Here, the podcast for HR and people professionals, making the hardest job in the world just a little bit easier. I'm Hiba Youssef.
I think we're hitting a point where we need to think about like culture, but not necessarily what culture is, but how we communicate what culture is, particularly to candidates. So obviously I'm coming from like a really recruitment focused and like employer branding standpoint, but I think how we communicate what our culture is really matters. And it's not just communicating on the front end what the culture is, but then lining things up with the action. So I'll give an example, like, and the easiest one right now, which I think most of us have moved past hopefully, is we'll treat you like family. Like if that's what you're communicating, but then your actions are, we're going to lay you off the minute that it makes sense to lay you off, that's not a good thing. And what actually happens is you just erode trust.
Let's be honest, HR doesn't have a data problem. It has a what do we actually do with this problem? Quantum Workplace helps leaders unlock talent insights that are often siloed, connecting engagement, performance, and development into a single clear view of your workforce. Because clarity leads to better decisions and better teams. Visit quantumworkplace.com to learn more. Welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast. I'm Hiba, your host. I have a special episode today, revisiting season 6, where I asked each guest what's one thing HR folks should rethink. I'm really in this new and rethinking vibe, writing about it in the newsletter, talking about it on the pod, and I felt that these answers should really be heard again, and maybe it'll spark some inspiration in you today, because Lord knows we all need it. With that, let's get into it. The first person you're going to hear from is Demario Bell. Demario Bell is a first-generation college student, startup advisor, TEDx organizer, speaker, and award-winning community strategist, currently serving as a senior community manager at Amazon Web Services. In his work, he leads the regional community strategy for North America, shaping how developers engage with AWS through user groups, community programs, and partnerships, and works closely with developer advocates and cross-functional teams to humanize beings at scale and strengthen long-term developer relationships. Demario was named LinkedIn's top community voice in 2023 and received multiple honors from CMX in 2024, including Best B2B Community Professional. Additionally, BASE recognized them as one of the top 100 customer marketing and advocacy influencers and strategists. Let's hear from Demario. This season, though, I'm writing in the newsletter all about rethinking things at work. And so I wanted to ask every guest this season, what's one thing you think HR folks should maybe rethink?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Heba. And I'm probably going to come in really hot with this one, so please forgive me, and to your listeners as well. Let me just say it. I'm authentic. I say, I really think that HR folks should really rethink how they design and implement equitable operations. And, we've been hearing a lot about equity lately, and I'm one of those people who talk about equity when equity is not cool to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, Heba, it's not just about like diversity in hiring, but as you know, it's ensuring that every system, like from promotions to performance evaluations, they're built with equity in mind. And I found that, too often these processes, they favor like people in certain groups or with certain perspectives. And so I really think that that if we actively like rework operations to be more inclusive, whether that's through like pay structures, diverse leadership, or unbiased decision-making frameworks, I believe that HR can truly create a level playing field for all their employees to have like equal access and opportunity. So that's the one thing I would say that HR folks should rethink.
I love that. I'm going to be writing about that a bit more this season too. So like this episode might come out before I dig into like performance management, but I'm writing about how we should rethink it, because you're right. It's not very equitable. I've worked places where the promotions process was just not even defined. And I'm like, how can you say it's fair and equitable if it's not even defined?
Come on now. Let's just say, like we all talk to each other. And so we all talk to each other. So when I hear certain stories from folks and it's opaque around like how to be promoted, what does a top performer look like? I'm just like, I'm looking at some of these companies sideways, like, how dare you?
I feel the same way. That's actually a whole other episode we'll get to next season, where all the sideways ways we've looked at companies, because I feel that in my soul. Up next is Joel. Joel is the realist recruiter. No, really, that's actually his brand. He is an internationally known recruiting leader and coach who has helped thousands of recruiters build their brands online. He's reached over 700K followers across platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and his content has been viewed over 2 billion times. Yep, billion. Highly recommend going to follow Joel on all platforms. Let's hear what Joel had to say.
What's one thing you think HR folks should rethink?
Yeah.
I need to write this sentence better, honestly. But like, what's the thing that you're like, no, we got to reimagine this. We got to do it differently.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about this like prior to the show.
Mm-hmm.
When I got into recruitment, which was a decade ago now, so I haven't been in, for 100 years, but a decade is enough to know like what's going on, right? And I worked on the agency side, so I've had the advantage of working with lots of different companies. I think we're hitting a point where we need to think about like culture, but not necessarily what culture is, but how we communicate what culture is, particularly to candidates. Obviously, I'm coming from like a really recruitment focused and like employer branding standpoint.
Yeah.
But I think how we communicate what our culture is really matters. And it's not just communicating on the front end what the culture is, but then lining things up with the action. So I'll give an example, like, and the easiest one right now, which I think most of us have moved past hopefully, is we'll treat you like family. Like if that's what you're communicating, but then your actions are, we're going to lay you off the minute that it makes sense to lay you off, that's not a good thing. And what actually happens is you just erode trust. Another example of this that I'm seeing is the conversation around remote work. Now, I'm totally fine with whether your belief is in office is better or hybrid or work from home, whatever your stance is, that's great. But I think as like HR and people who are the voice of what stance your company has, it's being honest and transparent with people. So a great example is a lot of companies said, I remember this because I was reading the articles and I was creating a lot of content around this. There were companies that would come out and say, yeah, we're going to be remote work. We're going to have remote work forever. That's how it's going to be. We're going to pioneer this. This is the future. And then 2 to 3 years later, they're now forcing people back to the office. And the problem with that is it just erodes trust. So I think there's these conversations around culture, who you are. We need to get more authentic and just be real and honest. And I think there's going to be a transition where Gen Z, Gen A, these generations, they're coming in with a lot more information. They've seen a lot more. There's a lot more voices on social media that you don't have control over. Yeah. And so I think really understanding like how can we create and communicate things authentically in a real way that are actually in line with what we're doing and our actions is going to be crucial. Because I think if we don't do that, you're just going to lose trust, and there's going to be a huge divide. And I actually think it's going to be really hard for particularly large companies. I actually think it's going to be really hard to like even just attract people to come and want to work for you. So
yeah,
it's influencing and it's getting leadership on board with that as well, which I think is part of the challenge. But it's just rethinking like what's this EVP that we're putting out there, and is it actually real? Because that's what people are craving nowadays. They're just craving authenticity, real, for better or for worse, right? Let them make that decision.
It's kind of wild when I see companies that like don't practice what they preach. And like we've all been there. I think a lot of companies get scared to just say the real thing. Like say you're going back to the office because you have a 13-year lease that you can't get out of.
Exactly.
I think like the employees would much rather hear that than we think we'll connect better in the office. Like, no, that's not. I feel like all the messaging around it, even Amazon has been really interesting because they just said come back to the office 5 days a week, and that caused a bunch of outcry, and now the employees are very upset. And I just keep thinking like the messaging around it was like, we want to connect, we want to be more innovative, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, your stock price is much higher than it was when the pandemic started, and like you're doing just fine. And like saying that innovation is suffering because people are working remotely is kind of like a lie.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Especially, I think what's tough is a lot of the same companies, like if you actually go back and you can just Google it,
yeah,
a lot of executives and leaders were actually saying the opposite. And they were saying, oh, It's way more better for employees, like helps with like work-life balance, and they're able to focus on their health, and they're able to like maintain priorities. so that content's still out there. Like I think
Embarrassing.
I think there's a company, I'm not even gonna name the name, but they you can go on my TikTok to find this. But I Googled like what their stance was on remote work, and one of their leaders was like, "Yeah, we're going to be innovators and pioneers in it, and like we really believe it's better." And I don't actually know what the data is, because I think, again, this is another thing where it's like there's a study show. The studies will show whatever you wanted to show with whatever
Agreed.
you're searching for. So if you want to search for in-office work increases employee engagement, there's probably a study that shows that, because it's like it seems like these studies are just created to show whatever someone's trying to point out.
Yep.
But I don't know. For most people I talk to, and every time I do a poll, for example, on LinkedIn or Instagram or any of the platforms where I'm following, I will say that it's usually 50-50 almost split between like remote work and hybrid. But the common thread all the time is less than 5% on every poll I've done, which I have thousands of respondents. Less than 5% of people say that their preferred option is 5 days a week in the office. So, but I know some CEOs and some leaders that are like diehard about being in the office 5 days a week, and I respect that, because they weren't the CEOs that were saying, "Hey, we're a huge fan of remote work."
Agreed.
So it's like, if you've been talking about being in the office for the last 5 years, amazing. But if you were just saying, "Hey, remote work and flexibility," because it's a good marketing tactic, just the same thing with DE&I, right? It's that same idea of like, hey, there was a time where it was fashionably cool to get the media and the attention. Now, where is that? And it's not. And then you just look and go, wow, okay, well, a lot of the executive team, there's not really that much diversity, so you can't really have cared that much about it. And so that's what I'm saying is like, cut the, like, whatever the trend is, like jumping on the trend because it's marketing, just be real. And it's like, if you don't actually stand for the things you're talking about, that's okay. Just be honest about it. And yeah, sure, you're going to lose some people. You maybe lose some, but that's okay, because what's worse is being a liar and people finding that out. That's how you really lose in the end. You know?
Yeah, that's how like you really turn the employees against you, honestly. I'm like, just tell them the truth as much as you can is honestly my best policy. My CEO and I, like, we don't argue about this as much anymore, but we had to find a middle ground between like transparency, because I was always like so much transparency, and he was like transparency but position it in a different way. And so we've like worked to find this groove where we can share things and in a way that feels good for both of us. So it's positioned correctly and it's transparent enough where I feel like the employee is understanding why we're doing something versus not understanding or thinking that we're doing something shady. Because there's just,
and I think that's a huge point, right? Is like people want to know, and this is why I always struggled in corporate, was like I wasn't very good at being told what to do without knowing why. But there's definitely like a generational shift, I think, where like a lot of more seasoned people, like they grew up in a time where it was like you just do what you're told and you don't really ask why. Like the culture was definitely not an ask why. And I think because of like, again, information and like there's so much access to information, and a lot more people now ask, well, why? And so when you're talking about the office, like, oh, you want to come back to the office? Okay, collaboration, but why? Like, or how? And it's like, if you're like, well, and I literally had a dinner with HR executives, and this was the whole focus. And there was an expert in workplace, kind of this whole conversation. And he said, you have to create like a purpose for it. So if you think you're just going to force people back in to like laptops and Zoom meetings, like it's not going to work out well.
Yeah.
If you're creating like a purpose and environment and activities that people can do and it makes sense and they go, yeah, I see the value in this. It's great. He's like, but I don't think that's actually what is going on. So I don't want to necessarily dominate the whole conversation around remote work.
Oh yeah. Let's get at it.
It's topics like that. All right. That's what I think. Like just with the EVP, try and be as authentic. I love what you said. Like be as transparent as you can. But that's what integrity is, right? It's being honest, not necessarily telling everybody everything about yourself, but being honest about the things and just being real, right?
Up next, we got Justin. Justin was the co-founder of Working Not Working, a global community connecting top creative talent with leading companies like Apple, Google, and Nike. Before that, he was an award-winning art director and creative director, best known for co-creating elfyourself.com. Justin's personal projects such as NY Garbage and Wants for Sale have gained widespread attention. He's dedicated to helping creatives feel less isolated, running the Talking Not Talking creative support group, and hosting the Overshare podcast. Justin was named one of Ad Age's 50 most creative people in 2015. Let's hear what he had to say.
What is one thing you think HR folks should rethink?
Oh, yeah. One thing I think HR folks should rethink their definition of people bringing them full selves to work. I think they really should embrace people's passions and interests in everything that they nerd out about outside of work, and allow them to bring that to the office. And the things that get them excited, that bring them joy, that stuff is contagious. So as much as you can encourage that and people bring that to work, I think the better, and it's going to pay dividends.
How do you encourage that at Working Not Working?
Well, we're a really small team, so we're 5 people full time, and we, a lot of times we're all remote. So like our meetings go way too long because we're just hanging out and talking about our weekends at the beginning. But it really is like finding out what everybody's into, right? So we got a few runners on the team, we've got a few parents on the team. We'll probably get into this later, where we launched a platform and we thought it was for bigger orgs, and we did it for our own team, and found out that like Nick, our developer, is really into woodworking, and Caitlin, our freelance producer, is a sound bath instructor. And I saw that and I was like, I've been wanting to get sound bath bowls, and we just nerded out and we got on a Zoom and just started talking about sound bath bowls. They are way too expensive. I'm not getting one now. They're like over $2,000. But just really knowing what people are into outside of work, and then like we can just like, shoot the shit and have a good time on that.
Yeah, work is just, I don't know. My direct report's a huge Taylor Swift fan, so we nerd out about like Taylor Swift related things, and we talk a lot about music. I think I was telling you this on our first call. She asked me about one of my favorite albums, and I ranted about it for 30 minutes, and she was like, wow, I didn't realize that's what this meeting was going to be about. And I was like, let me talk about track 1 to track 12 and the journey you're about to be on. And she was like, uh-huh. And it was really nice. We listen to a lot of the same music, so it worked out great. But I think it was just like a moment for me, and it's made our relationship so strong in 2 years, where I almost think she can predict how I'm going to react to a lot of things, simply because she knows me outside of who I am as a professional.
Yeah. And then that's the stuff. It's like, we talk about love languages, and we've done that, gone through our love languages with coworkers, which, not all of them are work appropriate, but still, like finding out what people are into is that love language. Is like, yeah, you might be really into, what is it? I think you should leave now, the Tim Robinson show, or maybe, whatever it is. And then it's like, all right, we all have some things in common, and be able to find that common ground goes a long way.
Yeah. Most HR tools give you dashboards full of data, but not a lot of direction. Quantum Workplace helps HR and people leaders connect the dots between engagement, performance, and development, so insights don't live in silos and decisions aren't made in the dark. The outcome? More confident leaders, stronger connections, and high-performing teams that support real business results, not just reports that sit untouched. If you're ready to move from collecting data to leading with it, check out Quantum Workplace at quantumworkplace.com.
Up next is my good friend Morgan. Morgan Williams is the CEO and founder of Peak HR. Morgan has extensive experience in employee lifecycle development, promoting corporate diversity, and designing people operations strategies for small to large corporations within a variety of industries. Let's hear
What's
what Morgan
one
had to say.
thing you think HR folks should rethink?
Oh, that's actually a really, really good question. And there's like so many different things that I have. But I think, something I'm thinking about that's a little bit different at this point is leadership. And I think the reason that I'm thinking about that is who we report to is always something we talk about, but also when you're reporting to somebody different, and how are you conveying these messages to the other C-suite? Like, it's something within there, and also who actually has accountability and like is taking that on. And I think so often we get caught up into this trap of dealing with it and teasing it out and handling it. But that's something that's really been on my mind of, we've got to think differently about that, and also see like, this actually isn't our problem. This actually isn't our problem. Like this is another person's problem.
I feel that in my soul. I talk a lot about leaders being like a common blocker to a lot of the things that we're trying to do in HR. But I do think there's like a real opportunity to stop and actually like level set the expectations, because so often they're like not accountable.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, this
100%.
is your doing. You literally did this. Like, your fault people are leaving this team. It is not my fault that people are quitting your team.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Oh, I think about that all the time. Also, really interesting, because I'm recording another podcast episode with our friend Jess Winder later today, and her zone of genius is leadership.
Love it. And love
So we'll have to do this episode first and then Jess's after, because she and I know are going to just probably go off on leaders.
Up next is another one of my good friends, Jessica Winder. Jessica is an HR executive known for shaking things up and empowering talent. With a no-nonsense approach and a passion for positive change, she champions good trouble in people operations. She also leads the Hidden Gem Career Coaching and authored The Hidden Gem Within to support career growth. A keynote speaker and startup advisor, Jessica is dedicated to driving meaningful change through good trouble and helping others build powerful personal brands. Let's hear what she had to say.
What is one thing you think HR people should rethink?
Yeah, there's a lot. But I think with this theme, it's holding leaders accountable. So a lot of time, leaders are only held accountable to metrics and numbers. They're not held accountable for actually being a leader, for leading a team, for like growing people, for getting people up to speed, for coaching, for being empathetic, like, you know, what we call quote unquote the soft skills. People are not actually held accountable to those. They are held accountable. Did you hit your metrics? And then you can be, you know, an asshole if you want to. And we need to rethink that, because it is harming. So many people have been harmed in the workplace. Workplace trauma is real. And it's mainly due to someone's direct leader. Okay. It's not someone in Never Never Land, you know, the CFO most of the time. It's who they directly report to.
Oh, this just like really hits home for me today. Jess and I were having a private conversation before this podcast recording, and it may or may not have been on holding certain leaders accountable for their actions. So I'm so glad you said that, because I do think we give leaders a pass a lot of times. We're like, oh, they're doing good for the business. They can, you know, not do their managerial duties, not submit their headcount requests correctly, not complete their reviews on time. But I'm just like, no, you have to do all of those things as well.
Yeah. You can't say that that's part of the job when you're not actually being held accountable for it. So I've yet to see most companies, I will say it this way. I have seen some good companies do this, but the majority of companies do not make the leadership reviews anything but metrics. It is not talking about your 360 review, your team's feedback about you. None of that comes into play. And it really is hurting a lot of people. And I think it's handicapping a lot of leaders from growing, actually, too, because the great leaders don't really get recognized for it. And if you're a sucky leader, as long as your metrics are good, you're fine.
We're going to get into what a good leader actually is today. So I love that what HR people should rethink is also associated with your zone of genius. I think you are a genius. That's just
thank you. I received that. I receive it.
You all the love. You're a genius. I love having you on.
Up next, you'll hear from Nikki. Nikki Rappaport has a decade of experience as a creative marketer and experienced designer, and excels at defining brands and propelling them into rapid growth backed by fanatical customer demand. Previously, she led brand and marketing at Cava, playing a key role in taking the local restaurant brand national. Now she's the Chief People and Culture Officer at Call Your Mother, a neighborhood bagel shop and deli with big plans to grow. A masterful storyteller and natural leader, Nikki thrives on cultivating strong relationships, building trust, and delivering exceptional experiences, internally and externally. She also happens to work at my favorite bagel shop. Let's hear what Nikki had to say.
What's one thing they think HR should rethink? So I want to kick off our episode with asking you that question.
Great. Love the question. And we're going to get into this later about probably my why behind this. But we need to rethink HR to be a creative department. So it's not just task management, moving through processes, it's creative problem solving, designing experiences for our team, and just building something that is imaginative and new and exciting every day.
I love that. I actually just did a talk this morning, and I said that the two things an HR team should be is creative and curious. So I love that you're bringing that up because we're going to
totally
talk
agree
about
with
it
both
today.
of those.
Last but certainly not least, you're hearing from Halai. Halai is currently the COO at Pluribus Digital. Prior to becoming the COO, she led the people and talent function and has a deep expertise in managing people, operations, IT, and marketing and comms functions. With a strong foundation and 10 plus years as a strategic HR leader, she excels at managing the delicate balance of the people and the business strategy. Halai has driven organizational growth by scaling operational infrastructure in startups and mid-sized organizations. She's dedicated to fostering high-performing teams and creating systems that balance business goals with employee experience. Let's hear from Halai.
What's one thing HR should rethink?
You know what? I was thinking about this morning and I was like, okay, what do I want to rethink? And I think it goes back to everything that we know that's happening in today's workforce, right? We're seeing a lot of engagement, employee engagement down across all demographics. There's greater employee turnover. People are struggling with balancing remote work and hybrid workplaces. Then you pair that with everything that's happening in HR and the diminishing seat that HR has at the table post-COVID. Can you even say post-COVID right now? When you think back to 2020, HR was at the helm, DEI was prioritized, and now those things are being deprioritized. I think the one thing when I think about rethinking HR and maintaining your seat at the table is just going back to a basics model, right? I was like, what can I say? It's not anything groundbreaking, but when I think about my day-to-day and the day-to-day of the people that I interact with very closely in the HR space, like yourself, I go back to something that I heard last week. I went to a conference. It was Aspire in DC. People have probably seen me post about it. Probably a lot of people post about it because there's a lot of cool people there. But one of the things that I heard was from Alan Stein. He's like a strategic basketball coach. He's coached like Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant, Steph Curry. You may have heard of him if you love basketball.
Cool.
What you don't see behind the screen is I'm 5'10" and a half. And so I'm also tall and I used to play. But he coached Kobe Bryant. And during that time, he actually attended one of Kobe's like early morning practices, another early bird who would show up at practice at 3:30 a.m. And he was just doing basic drills. And this guy, Alan, was telling the story like, I'm coaching like 12-year-olds. And Kobe Bryant, who's at the pinnacle of his career, is doing basic drills. And what he realized in having a conversation with Kobe is like the basics are never going to go away. Those fundamentals are definitely in practice always when you think about your workplace, what you do, your practice, your craft. And so when I think about where our true impact can come is a back to basics model where strategic HR and tactical HR should work together to reinforce the work. Like don't lose sight of the effective execution when trying to maintain and build upon the seat that you have.
Ooh, that was a mic drop. That was so good. Because I also a basketball player, but I'm only 5'6" and a half. I stopped growing at 10 or 12. I was taller than everybody for a decent 4 years, okay? And then everyone was way taller
until like I was like 16.
No, I was like really tall at 10, then everybody else outgrew me and I was the shortest girl. So I also love a basketball example, but that's so right. Like sometimes we do forget about the execution piece. And I always say like my strengths lie in the strategic, but I've really been spending the last, honestly, like year and a half, really honing my like execution craft. Because I do think no matter how high up you go in an organization, you still have to understand how the work gets done.
Yeah. And I think it's also like you have somebody's ear, they're paying attention, you have the seat. Don't let it falter. I mean, we all make mistakes and there are opportunities to build and grow from that, but really honing in on the craft of like effective execution, putting processes in place and systems in place, enable you to keep people's attention. And that's what I want people to rethink.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you loved this revisit of season 6 and the things that we should rethink. It felt really important for the moment we're in as work is changing more rapidly than it's ever changed before. And I think our cadence of how we think about things will also change faster than it's ever changed before. And maybe the solutions we built 6 months ago might not actually work for today. Honestly, sometimes I worry that the solutions I built 6 weeks ago don't work for today. So I wanted to give you that dose of inspiration, hearing from these guests on all the things that we should rethink, and hopefully that brings some joy to your day. I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep up with all the latest HR resources by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And if you love I Hate It Here, tell an HR friend. I'll see you next time.